Poor black guy saves a pretty girl, unaware she's a billionaire who will change his fate forever. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's community kitchen buzzed like angry wasps as Tyrell Washington wiped down the last serving counter. His back ached from 12 hours of lifting donation boxes, serving meals, and mopping floors that never seemed to stay clean. The digital clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., but time moved differently in this part of the city, where hope came in the form of a warm meal and desperation wore 1,000 different faces. "You don't have to stay this late every night, Tyrell," called out Mrs. Rodriguez, the kitchen coordinator, as she gathered her things. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many good people burn out trying to save the world. "The mess will still be here tomorrow." Tyrell looked up from scrubbing a stubborn stain on the stainless steel counter. His reflection stared back at him, 24 years old but with eyes that had seen enough struggle to age him beyond his years. "Someone's got to make sure everything's ready for breakfast service. Besides, it's not like I got anywhere important to be." Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head with a mix of admiration and concern. She'd watched Tyrell volunteer here for 3 years, never missing a day, never complaining, even when his own life was falling apart. "Your sister needs you healthy, Mijo. Don't forget that." The mention of Zara sent a familiar knot of worry through Tyrell's chest. His 17-year-old sister had been battling chronic kidney disease for 2 years, and the medical bills were drowning them both. Even with his 3 part-time jobs, delivery driver, weekend construction work, and grocery store stock boy, the money never stretched far enough. The eviction notice tucked in his back pocket felt like it was burning through the denim. "I know," he said quietly. "Just finishing up." Mrs. Rodriguez locked the front door behind her, leaving Tyrell alone with the familiar sounds of the neighborhood, distant sirens, the rumble of late-night buses, and the occasional shout from the streets. This part of downtown wasn't pretty, but it was real. No pretense, no fake smiles. People here understood struggle because they lived it every day. As Tyrell finished cleaning, he mentally calculated tomorrow's schedule. Morning shift at the grocery store, afternoon delivery runs, then back here for evening service. Somewhere in between, he needed to call the landlord again, maybe beg for another week's extension on the rent. The thought made his stomach clench. He was pulling on his worn leather jacket when the scream cut through the night air like a blade. High-pitched, desperate, and close. Too close. Every instinct told him to mind his own business. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where playing hero ended well. But the scream came again, raw with terror, and Tyrell's feet were moving before his brain could stop them. He pushed through the kitchen's back exit into the alley behind the building. The narrow passage was lit only by a single street light at the far end, casting long shadows between the dumpsters and fire escapes. The scream had come from the right, toward the dead end where the alley turned. Tyrell's heart hammered against his ribs as he moved forward, his sneakers silent on the wet pavement. He could hear voices now, low and threatening, punctuated by quick, frightened breaths. "Please, I already gave you my purse," a woman's voice pleaded. "That's everything I have." "Nah, sweetheart," came a man's voice, rough with the kind of desperation that made people dangerous. "This is a nice watch. Real nice. And these earrings, you're holding out on us." Tyrell peered around the corner of a dumpster and felt his blood freeze. A young woman, maybe his age, was pressed against the brick wall by 2 men. Even in the dim light, he could see the fear in her eyes and the way her hands shook as one of the attackers pressed a knife to her throat, while the other ransacked her belongings. The smart thing would be to call 911 and wait for help. But the woman whimpered as the knife pressed closer to her skin, and Tyrell knew she didn't have time for smart decisions. He grabbed a loose brick from the crumbling wall beside him and stepped into the light. "Hey!" he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "Let her go." Both men spun around, and Tyrell got his first good look at them. The one with the knife was thin and wiry, with hollow cheeks that spoke of too many missed meals and bad choices. The other was bigger, broader, with prison tattoos creeping up his neck. Neither looked like they'd back down easy. "Walk away, boy," the bigger one snarled. "This ain't your business." "Seems like it is now." Tyrell replied, weighing the brick in his hand. His mouth was dry, but his voice stayed steady. He'd learned long ago that showing fear was like blood in the water. The man with the knife laughed, a sound like broken glass. You think you're some kind of hero? This is our block, our rules. Your block? Tyrell took a step closer, and he could see the woman's eyes widen. She was pretty, with dark hair that caught the streetlight, but what struck him most was how she looked at him, not with the desperate gratitude he'd expected, but with something like surprise. Like she wasn't used to people standing up for her. Funny, I've been working in this neighborhood for 3 years, and I ain't never seen you before. The tension in the alley was thick enough to cut. Tyrell could feel the woman's fear, could smell the mixture of garbage and rain that always hung in the air back here. But he also felt something else, a strange calm that came over him when he had no choice but to stand his ground. The big man moved first, lunging forward with surprising speed. But Tyrell had been in enough fights growing up to know that size didn't always win. He sidestepped and brought the brick down hard on the man's wrist. The crack echoed off the alley walls, followed by a howl of pain. The second man came at him with the knife, slashing wildly. Tyrell jumped back, feeling the blade whistle past his chest. He threw the brick hard, catching the attacker in the shoulder and sending him stumbling backward. Run! Tyrell shouted to the woman, but she was already moving, scrambling away from the wall toward the mouth of the alley. The man with the injured wrist was reaching for something in his jacket, probably a gun, Tyrell realized with cold clarity. Time slowed down. He could stay and fight, probably die in this alley for a woman he didn't even know. Or he could run and live with the guilt. But as the woman reached the alley entrance, she turned back. Her eyes met his across the distance, and in that moment, Tyrell saw something that changed everything. Not gratitude or desperation, but recognition. Like she was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. This way, she called out, and there was authority in her voice that didn't match her earlier fear. Tyrell didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted toward her as the sound of a gunshot cracked behind him, the bullet sparking off the brick wall where his head had been a second before. They ran together through the maze of side streets and alleys, not stopping until they reached the main road where the bright lights of a 24-hour diner offered safety in numbers. Only then did Tyrell realize he was bleeding, a thin line across his forearm where the knife had caught him. You're hurt, the woman said, and her voice was different now. Calmer. Like the terrified victim from the alley had been replaced by someone else entirely. It's nothing, Tyrell panted, though the cut stung. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? She shook her head, and he noticed for the first time how she was dressed, jeans and a simple sweater that looked expensive even in the harsh fluorescent light. Her hair was messed up from running, but there was something about the way she carried herself that didn't quite fit with someone who'd just been mugged. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes directly. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did, Tyrell replied. Couldn't just walk away. She studied his face for a long moment, and he had the strange feeling she was memorizing it. I'm Leah, she said finally. Leah. I work as an intern at a local nonprofit. The pause was so brief he almost missed it, but something about the way she said it felt practiced. Rehearsed. Tyrell, he said. I volunteer at Murphy's Community Kitchen. I know that place, Leah said quickly. I've been thinking about getting involved. With volunteer work, I mean. They walked slowly toward the bus stop, either seeming eager to end the conversation. Despite everything that had just happened, Tyrell found himself curious about this woman who'd gone from terrified victim to composed stranger in the span of 15 minutes. Why didn't you want to call the police? He asked as they waited under the flickering streetlight. Leah's face went carefully blank. I don't like dealing with authorities. It's complicated. Another non-answer that felt like it was hiding something bigger. But Tyrell had learned not to push when people weren't ready to share their stories. Everyone in his neighborhood had secrets, reasons for keeping their heads down. When her bus arrived, Leah turned to him one more time. Will you be at the kitchen tomorrow night? Every night, Tyrell said. 7 to close. She nodded, and for just a moment, her composed mask slipped. He saw something vulnerable underneath, something that looked like loneliness. Maybe I'll stop by, she said as she climbed onto the bus. To thank you properly. As the bus pulled away, Tyrell stood under the streetlight watching its red taillights disappear into the night. He touched the cut on his arm and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. There had been something about Leah that didn't add up. The way she'd taken charge when they were running, the expensive clothes, the careful way she'd avoided giving him her last name. But there had also been something real in her eyes when she looked back at him in the alley. Something that made him hope she meant it about stopping by the kitchen. Walking home to his cramped apartment, Tyrell pushed the eviction notice deeper into his pocket and tried not to think about how one chance encounter might have just changed everything, though he had no idea how much. 3 days passed before Leah showed up at Murphy's community kitchen, and when she did, Tyrell almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the expensive-looking clothes, replaced by worn jeans and a faded volunteer t-shirt that looked like it had seen better days. But her posture was all wrong for someone used to wearing thrift store finds. Too straight, too confident. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, Tyrell said, looking up from ladling soup into containers for the evening meal prep. I keep my promises, Leah replied, though something flickered across her face. Where do I start? Mrs. Rodriguez assigned her to table cleanup, the easiest job for new volunteers. Tyrell watched from the serving line as Leah approached her first table of diners, 3 homeless men who'd been regulars for months. She stood there for a full minute, clearly unsure how to begin clearing around people who were still eating. Excuse me, she finally said, her voice too formal, too polite. May I, are you finished with? One of the men, Carlos, looked up with raised eyebrows. You new, sweetheart? Yes, this is my first time volunteering anywhere, actually. The admission was so honest it caught Tyrell off guard. He'd expected her to have some experience, given how she'd mentioned wanting to get involved. But watching her fumble with the basic rhythm of the kitchen, when to clear tables, how to talk to the diners, even which cleaning supplies to use, it became clear she wasn't lying. Let me show you, Tyrell said during the dinner rush lull, moving over to her station. The key is reading the room. See how Mr. Johnson there is still picking at his bread? That means he's not ready, even if his plate looks empty. Leah nodded, absorbing every word like she was studying for an exam. How do you know all their names? Time, Tyrell said simply. Most of these folks have been coming here longer than I've been volunteering. They got stories, just like everybody else. For the next 2 hours, Leah shadowed Tyrell as he moved through the kitchen with practiced ease. She asked questions constantly, not just about the work, but about the people. Why did Mrs. Patterson always sit alone? How long had Tommy been living on the streets? What kind of help did people actually need beyond food? You're awfully curious for someone who just wants to volunteer, Tyrell said as they cleaned up after closing. Leah paused in wiping down a table. Is that wrong? I want to understand. Really understand. There was something in her voice that made Tyrell look closer. Understand what? How it all works. How people end up here, what keeps them here, what actually helps them get out. She gestured around the kitchen. This place feeds people, but then what? Where do they go when the doors close? Tyrell set down his mop and studied her face. You sound like someone writing a report. No, Leah's cheeks flushed. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so analytical. I've just never been around. I mean, I grew up very differently. Privileged? The word came out sharper than Tyrell intended. Yes, Leah said quietly. Very. The honesty disarmed him. Well, at least you're not pretending otherwise. Most people who come here from nice neighborhoods, they want to help, but they also want to feel good about themselves. Like poverty is something you can fix with a few hours of volunteering. And it's not. Hell no. Poverty's got roots. Systems. Mrs. Patterson sits alone because she's got mental illness that ain't being treated properly. Tommy's been on the streets since he aged out of foster care at 18 with no skills and no family. Half the people who come through here work full-time jobs but still can't afford rent in this city. Leah absorbed this information with an intensity that surprised him. So what would actually help? Money, Tyrell said bluntly. Better housing policies. Mental health services that don't have waiting lists longer than a year. Job training that leads to jobs that actually pay living wages. He laughed bitterly. But those aren't problems you solve with volunteer shifts. What if someone wanted to do more than volunteer? Leah asked carefully. Hypothetically. Hypothetically? They'd need to understand that charity ain't the same as justice. Giving someone a meal makes them less hungry today. Changing the systems that made them hungry in the first place, that's different work entirely. Over the following weeks, Leah became a regular presence at the kitchen. She was terrible at most tasks initially, burning the coffee, mixing up orders, dropping entire trays of food. But she kept coming back, kept asking questions, kept pushing herself to understand not just how to volunteer, but why the volunteering was necessary. Tyrell found himself looking forward to their conversations during prep work. Despite her privileged background, Leah listened without judgment when he talked about his own struggles, the constant juggling of jobs, the stress of Zara's medical bills, the shame of not being able to provide better for his sister. I got an eviction notice last month, he admitted one evening as they sorted donations. Haven't told Zara yet. Don't want her worrying about it on top of everything else. How much do you owe? Leah asked. 3,000. Might as well be 3 million. Tyrell laughed humorlessly. Been trying to pick up extra shifts, but there's only so many hours in a day. Leah was quiet for a long moment. What if someone wanted to help? A loan, maybe? From who? You. Tyrell shook his head. No offense, but you're an intern. You probably got your own student loans to worry about. Right, Leah said quickly. Of course. I wish there was something I could do. 2 days later, Tyrell received a call from his landlord. An anonymous donor had paid his rent for the next 3 months. When he pressed for details, all he was told was that someone had heard about his situation and wanted to help. Any idea who it might be? Mrs. Rodriguez asked when he shared the news at the kitchen. Tyrell glanced over at Leah, who was carefully avoiding eye contact while organizing canned goods. No idea, he said. But I'm grateful. That same week, Zara called with news that a local nonprofit had approved her for a special medication assistance program she'd never heard of. The week after that, Tyrell got a call about a part-time job with better pay that seemed tailor-made for his schedule. Someone had recommended him, though they wouldn't say who. Each piece of good fortune felt like a small miracle, but the timing was starting to feel less than coincidental. And every time something good happened, Tyrell noticed Leah watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, satisfaction mixed with something that looked almost like guilt. You know what's funny? He said one evening as they walked to the bus stop together. Ever since that night we met, my luck's been changing. That's great, Leah replied, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Yeah. Makes me wonder if I got some kind of guardian angel looking out for me. Leah stopped walking. For a moment, she looked like she was about to say something important. Then her phone buzzed, and her face went pale as she read the message. I have to go, she said abruptly. I'm sorry, family emergency. She was already hurrying toward a black car that had appeared at the curb as if by magic, leaving Tyrell standing alone under the streetlight, more curious than ever about the woman who'd entered his life with so many secrets. 23 floors above the city, Leah Ashbourne stood in her penthouse bathroom, scrubbing the smell of industrial soap and cafeteria food from her hands. The marble countertop was cluttered with expensive skincare products she barely used anymore, too tired most nights to do anything but collapse into bed after her shifts at Murphy's kitchen. Her reflection stared back from the mirror, the same face that graced Forbes covers and charity gala programs, though Tyrell had never shown a flicker of recognition. Why would he? In his world, billionaire heiresses were as fictional as superheroes. Miss Ashbourne? Her assistant Marcus appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand and disapproval written across his sharp features. Your father's been calling. The board meeting was moved up to 9 a.m. Leah sighed, pulling her dark hair back into the sleek chignon expected of an Ashbourne. What's the crisis this time? The quarterly review of foundation expenditures. There are questions about some recent donations. Her stomach dropped. What kind of questions? Marcus consulted his tablet with the precision of someone paid handsomely to manage disasters. A $3,000 rent payment to a downtown landlord. Medical assistance for a minor with kidney disease. Job placement fees. All trace back to foundation accounts you have access to. Leah's hands stilled on her necklace. She'd been so careful, routing the money through subsidiary programs, making everything look like normal charitable giving. Those are legitimate assistance cases. Yes, but they weren't approved through proper channels. And they all seem connected to one individual, Tyrell Washington. Heat crept up Leah's neck. He's not connected to anything. He's just someone who needed help. Marcus's expression softened slightly. He'd worked for the Ashbourne family for 12 years, watching Leah grow from an idealistic teenager into a woman torn between duty and conscience. Miss, you know I care about your well-being. But this kind of personal involvement is exactly what's wrong with philanthropy. Leah finished, her voice sharp. We sit in boardrooms deciding who deserves help based on spreadsheets and tax benefits, never actually meeting the people we're supposedly serving. Your father sees it differently. Of course he did. Richard Ashbourne had built the family foundation into a billion-dollar operation by treating charity like a business, efficient, measurable, and safely distant from the messy realities of actual poverty. The elevator ride to the foundation offices felt longer than usual. Through the glass walls, Leah could see the gleaming conference room where the board was already assembled. 12 men and women in expensive suits, all old enough to be her parents, all convinced they knew better than she did about everything. Her father stood at the head of the table, silver-haired and commanding in the way that came from a lifetime of having people hang on his every word. He didn't look up when she entered. Leah, good of you to join us. His tone could have frozen water. We were just discussing your recent, creative interpretation of foundation protocols. Board member Patricia Hartwell, a woman who'd never been closer to poverty than writing checks from her Park Avenue apartment, leaned forward with false concern. Darling, we understand you're passionate about direct intervention. But $3,000 in rent assistance? For one individual? That's not how we operate. Maybe it should be, Leah said, taking her seat. Do you know what $3,000 means to someone like Tyrell? It's the difference between having a home and sleeping in his car. It's his sister being able to stay in school instead of dropping out to work. And what happens when word gets out that the Ashbourne Foundation is now a personal ATM for anyone with a sob story? Her father's voice cut through the room. We have procedures for a reason. Our procedures are broken, Leah shot back. We spend more money on charity galas than we do on actual charity. We fund programs that look good in press releases but don't change anything fundamental. The room went quiet. Board member James Morrison cleared his throat. Leah, your enthusiasm is admirable, but you're young. You don't understand the complexities. I understand that while we're sitting here debating whether $3,000 is too much to help one family, there are people sleeping outside this building who work 40 hours a week and still can't make rent. Her father's jaw tightened. This conversation is over. You will cease this urban internship immediately and focus on your responsibilities here. My responsibilities? Leah stood up, her chair scraping against the marble floor. You mean sitting in meetings talking about helping people while making sure we never actually have to see them? I mean preparing to take over this foundation when I retire. Acting like the leader you were born to be, not playing dress-up in soup kitchens. The words hit like a slap. Playing dress-up. As if the past months had been some kind of game, as if the people she'd come to care about were just props in her rebellious phase. Those people aren't costumes, Dad. They're real. Their problems are real. And they deserve better than being someone's tax write-off. Richard Ashbourne's expression hardened. You're emotionally compromised. It's affecting your judgment. Maybe having emotions about poverty isn't the problem. Maybe the problem is that everyone in this room is too comfortable to feel anything about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Leah looked around the table at faces that ranged from shocked to disappointed to coldly calculating. These people had known her since she was a child, had watched her grow up in this world of privilege and responsibility. Now they were looking at her like she'd become a stranger. Patricia Hartwell spoke first. Perhaps some time away from these influences would help restore perspective. What influences? Leah's voice was dangerously quiet. This man you've become attached to, her father said. Tyrell Washington. It's clear he's become more than just a charity case to you. Heat flooded Leah's face. He's not a charity case. He's the most genuine person I've ever met. He works 3 jobs to take care of his sister, volunteers every night at the kitchen, and still finds time to help other people. He's everything you all claim to support, and nothing like the people in this room. He's also someone who doesn't know who you really are. Morrison pointed out. What happens when he finds out? Do you think he'll still want your friendship when he realizes you've been lying to him? The question hit harder than Leah expected. She'd been pushing that worry to the back of her mind for weeks, telling herself she'd find the right time to tell Tyrell the truth. But as the days passed and their friendship deepened, the lie had grown bigger, more complicated. I'll tell him when I'm ready. You'll tell him nothing, her father said firmly. Because you're done with this experiment. Security will escort you out of any establishment in that neighborhood. Your credit cards and foundation access are being temporarily suspended. It's time to remember who you are, Leah. I know exactly who I am, Leah said, grabbing her purse. The question is whether I'm brave enough to be that person. She walked out of the conference room with her head high, but her hands were shaking. By the time she reached her penthouse, the full weight of what had just happened was sinking in. No more kitchen. No more Tyrell. No more pretending she could bridge the gap between her world and his. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tyrell. You okay? You seemed upset earlier. See you tomorrow? Leah stared at the message until her vision blurred. Tomorrow she'd have to face him with the truth, or face him with another lie. Either way, everything was about to change. Tyrell was running late for his morning shift at the grocery store when he saw the flyer. It was stuck to a telephone pole outside Murphy's kitchen, rain-soaked and partially torn, but the image was clear enough to stop him dead in his tracks. The woman in the photograph wore an elegant evening gown and a smile that belonged in magazines. Her hair was styled in a way that screamed expensive salon, and she stood behind a podium with Ashbourne Foundation emblazoned across it. But it was her face that made Tyrell's world tilt sideways. It was Leah. The headline read, Visionary Future of Philanthropy, Leah Ashbourne to lead Foundation's Urban Initiative. Tyrell's hands shook as he pulled the flyer free from the pole, ignoring the way the wet paper tore at the edges. He read the text twice, then 3 times, but the words didn't change. Leah Ashbourne? Heiress. Billionaire. The woman who'd been asking him how to properly clean tables was worth more money than everyone in his neighborhood would see in 10 lifetimes. No, he said aloud, earning a strange look from a passing jogger. No way. But even as he denied it, pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. The expensive clothes she tried to hide. The way she'd asked questions like she was studying them all. The anonymous rent payment. Zara's sudden approval for medical assistance. The perfectly timed job opportunity. She'd been treating him like a charity case. Like a project. Tyrell's phone buzzed. A text from Leah. Can we meet early today? I need to talk to you about something important. He stared at the message, then at the flyer, then back at the message. The casual tone made him want to throw his phone against the wall. How long had she been planning this conversation? How many different ways had she rehearsed telling him the truth? Instead of responding, he pulled up a news app and searched. Leah Ashbourne. The results flooded his screen. society pages showing her at charity galas, business articles about the foundation's billion-dollar endowment, a recent interview where she talked about innovative approaches to urban poverty. And then he found the live stream. It was happening right now, some kind of press conference at the Ashbourne Foundation. Tyrell clicked the link and watched his phone screen fill with the image of a pristine conference room. Important-looking people in expensive suits sat around a polished table, and at the center of it all was Leah. But this wasn't the Leah he knew. This woman's posture was different, more formal. Her voice carried authority as she spoke about targeted interventions and sustainable impact metrics. She looked completely at home in that world of marble and money, like she never struggled to figure out which cleaning supplies to use or how to talk to homeless people. The foundation is committed to evidence-based philanthropy, she was saying to the cameras. We believe in strategic giving that creates measurable outcomes rather than simply alleviating immediate symptoms. Strategic giving. Measurable outcomes. The words felt like knives. Is that what Tyrell had been to her? A measurable outcome? His phone rang. Leah's name appeared on the screen, but he couldn't answer. Couldn't trust himself to speak without saying something he'd regret. The call went to voicemail, then rang again immediately. By the time he made it to Murphy's kitchen that evening, word had somehow gotten out. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting for him at the door, her face a mix of confusion and concern. Tyrell, did you know? She asked without preamble. About your friend Leah? What about her? His voice came out rougher than intended. Someone showed me a news article. Says she's some kind of billionaire heiress. Says she's been volunteering here as part of some urban initiative thing. Urban initiative. Even the name made him sick. Did you know? Mrs. Rodriguez asked again, gentler this time. Tyrell shook his head. Found out this morning. Mijo. She reached out like she wanted to comfort him, then seemed to think better of it. Maybe there's an explanation. Yeah, Tyrell said. The explanation is I was stupid enough to think she actually cared. The evening shift passed in a blur. Every time someone mentioned Leah's name, and they all did, the news having spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, Tyrell felt the betrayal hit fresh. People were asking if he'd known, if she'd said anything, if the money problems that had mysteriously resolved themselves were connected to her. He deflected the questions and focused on the work, but his mind kept circling back to every conversation they'd had. How many times had she lied to his face? When he'd talked about his struggles with rent, with Zara's medical bills, with feeling powerless to change anything, had she been taking notes? Planning her next strategic intervention? The worst part was remembering how grateful he'd been. How he'd actually started to believe that maybe his luck was changing, that maybe good things could happen to people like him without strings attached. He was wiping down tables when she appeared. Leah stood in the doorway of the kitchen, still wearing the expensive blouse from her press conference. She looked smaller somehow, uncertain in a way that the confident woman on the live stream hadn't been. The entire kitchen went quiet. Even the diners stopped eating to stare at the billionaire who'd been serving them soup for months. Tyrell, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? He set down his cleaning rag very carefully, focusing on the simple action to keep his hands from shaking with anger. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Miss Ashbourne. The formal title hit like a slap. Leah flinched, but she took a step forward. Please, let me explain. Explain what? Tyrell finally looked at her directly, and he saw her face go pale at whatever she found in his expression. Explain how you've been lying to me for months. Explain how I've been your little pet project. Your urban experience? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. He stood up, and several people moved closer, sensing trouble. You want to know what's funny? I actually started to trust you. Started to think maybe someone could care about me without wanting something in return. I do care about you, Leah said, and there were tears in her eyes now. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It started as something else. But it became real. You became real to me. Real? Tyrell laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Lady, I was never not real. But apparently you never were. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Leah followed him into the alley behind the kitchen, the same alley where they'd first met. Tyrell, please, she said. I wanted to tell you. I tried to find the right time. There's no right time to tell someone you've been playing them for months. I wasn't playing you. Then what do you call it? He spun around to face her. You had your assistant research me, didn't you? Found out about my rent problems, about Zara's medical bills. Then you swooped in like some kind of fairy godmother, making all my problems disappear while pretending to be just another volunteer. Leah's silence was answer enough. Did you laugh about it? Tyrell asked, his voice getting quieter, more dangerous. When you went back to your penthouse, did you and your rich friends laugh about the poor black guy who was so grateful for your help? No, Leah said fiercely. Never. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Tell me why you lied to me every single day for months. Leah opened her mouth, then closed it. Whatever explanation she'd planned seemed to die in her throat. That's what I thought, Tyrell said. He started walking toward the street, then stopped. By the way, thanks for the rent money. I'll make sure to pay it back. I don't want to owe you anything. He left her standing in the alley, and it wasn't until he was 3 blocks away that he realized he was crying. 6 months later, Tyrell stood in front of a crowd of reporters, community leaders, and neighborhood residents, looking out at faces that represented everything the Rise Project had come to mean. The transformed space behind him bore little resemblance to the old Murphy's kitchen. It was bigger, brighter, with dedicated areas for job training, mental health counseling, and childcare alongside the expanded dining facility. A year ago, I thought helping people meant putting band-aids on problems, Tyrell said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the cameras focused on him. I thought if we could just feed folks, house folks, give them what they needed to survive another day, that was enough. In the back of the crowd, he spotted a familiar figure. Leah stood partially hidden behind a news van, wearing a simple black dress and no makeup. She'd kept her promise to stay away during the rebuilding, but somehow he wasn't surprised she'd come for the grand opening. Their eyes met for just a moment before she looked away. But surviving ain't the same as living, Tyrell continued. And charity ain't the same as justice. What we're opening today isn't just about feeding people, it's about feeding possibility. The applause was warm, genuine. Mrs. Rodriguez, now the facility coordinator, wiped tears from her eyes. Tommy, who'd completed the job training program and was starting work as a maintenance supervisor next week, cheered from the front row. After the speeches and ribbon cutting, after the tours and interviews, Tyrell found himself alone in the main dining area, exhausted but satisfied. The Rise Project was real, not just a kitchen but a comprehensive community center that addressed root causes instead of just symptoms. It's incredible. He turned to find Leah standing in the doorway. Up close, she looked tired but peaceful in a way he'd never seen before. I thought you were staying away, he said. I was. I did. But I couldn't miss this. She gestured around the space. This is everything you talked about that first night. Everything you said people actually needed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, taking in the transformation. The walls were covered with artwork from community members, job placement announcements, and photos from the past 6 months of construction and programming. I heard you turned down the mayor's job offer, Leah said. Tyrell nodded. This is where I belong. Besides, someone's got to make sure all that money gets used right. You don't trust me? I don't trust anyone with that much power. That's why we got the Community Oversight Board, the transparent budgeting, the whole system we built. He paused. But for what it's worth, you did keep your word. No interference, no strings, no publicity stunts. I'm learning that trust has to be earned back, not bought back. They were interrupted by the sound of laughter from the kitchen, where some of the evening volunteers were cleaning up after the opening day celebration. Normal sounds of normal people doing the work that mattered. I saw the article about your new consulting work, Tyrell said. helping other foundations reform their practices. Leah smiled ruefully. Turns out there's a market for someone who can explain why traditional philanthropy doesn't work. Who knew? You living off that income now? Modest apartment, used car, actual grocery shopping. She laughed. My father thinks I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. But I sleep better now. Tyrell studied her face. The polished heiress was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she'd found her footing in the real world. You look different. I feel different. Turns out when you stop trying to fix people from a distance, you can actually see them. Is that what you were doing? Trying to fix me? Leah was quiet for a long moment. At first, maybe. But somewhere along the way, you started fixing me instead. Showing me what it meant to care about something bigger than yourself. Before Tyrell could respond, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with a clipboard full of the day's statistics. Meals served, job applications submitted, counseling sessions scheduled. We're already at capacity for next week's programming, she announced, beaming. And Carlos wants to know if we can add evening literacy classes. We'll make it work, Tyrell said automatically, then caught himself. Actually, what do you think, Leah? You got any ideas about funding literacy programs? It was the first time he'd asked her opinion about anything in months. Leah looked surprised, then thoughtful. The state has grant money sitting unused because most nonprofits don't know how to navigate the application process. I could help with that. Pro bono. You'd want to get involved again? Only if you want me to. And only in whatever capacity you think makes sense. Mrs. Rodriguez looked between them, reading the undercurrent of the conversation. I think I'll go check on the kitchen cleanup, she said diplomatically, disappearing with her clipboard. Tyrell and Leah stood alone again, 6 months of distance and hurt between them, but also something new, respect maybe. Understanding. I can't go back to how things were, Tyrell said finally. Too much happened. I know. I wouldn't want to. That relationship was built on lies, even if I didn't mean it that way. But maybe we could build something new. Something honest. Leah nodded slowly. Partners. Colleagues. People who care about the same things. People who trust each other enough to argue when they disagree. People who understand that helping others isn't about being a hero. It's about being human. Tyrell extended his hand, formal but genuine. Welcome to the Rise Project, consultant. Leah shook it, her grip firm. Thank you, co-director. As they walked through the space together, pointing out improvements and discussing expansion plans, Tyrell realized something had shifted. The anger was gone, replaced by something more sustainable, partnership based on shared purpose rather than hidden agendas. You know what the best part is? He said as they reached the front entrance, looking back at everything they'd built. What's that? She didn't just change my life, Tyrell said, echoing the words he'd spoken to the crowd earlier. She showed me how to change others too. But the she isn't you, Leah. It's this place. This community. These people who showed up every day to make something better. Leah smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it reached her eyes completely. That's the point, isn't it? Real change was never about any one person. It was always about all of us. Together, they turned off the lights and locked the doors, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new people ready to rise.